So I've been walking you guys through these 50 stories in this book, The 5-Minute Zen Solution. So here's this week's story. Nyotu was born feeling the weather. He could tell when a storm was coming way before anybody else. Just like how the birds, I love how this guy writes, how the birds gather on the wire and how animals find their way under bushes. He would know. His grandmother called it a gift. Others called it anxiety. But either way, it was a part of him. And as he grew older, he got more and more into being with this gift, anxiety, whatever you want to call it. He became very vigilant. He had an umbrella in every room. His phone was filled with weather apps. And his colleagues would tease him, but he didn't care because he felt prepared. Well, years go by and he's starting to feel the intensity of this vigilance. And so he decides to go to a monastery to see if he can loosen that grip on that a little bit. And the third day he was at the monastery, the clouds started darkening, his chest tensioned. He went and found his umbrella, he locked the door, and when they asked him to go for the morning meditation, he said, "No, it's going to rain on you guys." But it didn't. And that afternoon, the sky broke open, the sun came out, and he comes out of his room and sees a monk walking, and he says, I was sure it was going to rain. And the monk says, "We often brace for things that never happen." And so the next day, he saw the darkened clouds start to come again. He felt that tightness in his chest, and he thought, this time I'm going to relax a little bit with this. And he went out to do the morning meditation. And the prompt for this week was, how often do you spend energy bracing for something that never happens? And so that's what I have been meditating on this week. And it got me thinking about power. True power. Not the kind that most people define as power, which is having influence over others, but the power we have within ourselves that we constantly give away all the time. How many here have ever said to somebody, "What you're doing is uncomfortable, so please change"? Maybe not in those words. Maybe you had many different words around it. But that was the sense of it. What you did was give your power away. What I do is give my power away. Whenever I say that, whenever I'm thinking that, whenever I'm moving that way, like what that person did made me feel. Have you had that thought? What happened made me feel. You gave your power away. And that's what we do all the time. And so we're in a world where we're looking around and sometimes we feel helpless. Like I read the news every day because I don't want to give my power away. And by anything I'm avoiding, I am giving my power to. Thinking that it has enough power where I need to avoid it, where I can't be fully myself in that, with that. Because that's my practice, is to be fully myself, no matter what is happening out here. That's the practice. Now, I've been lucky. Since I was a kid, I have been extraordinarily uncomfortable with life. I mean, in so many different ways, physically, because I had ulcerative colitis at a young age, mentally, emotionally. I mean, it's just been finding my way, navigating life in so much discomfort has actually turned out to be the greatest blessing I could have had. And you're going to go, how? And it's because it really taught me how to be with being uncomfortable. It taught me how to be with that. Now, instead, what could have happened is I could have kept shrinking and shrinking and shrinking my life. Maybe you know somebody who's done that, who through the uncomfortability of being in the world, what they have done is made their world smaller and smaller and smaller. Of course, the problem with that is it doesn't make it any less uncomfortable. Because the uncomfortableness isn't out here anyway. Whenever we say to somebody else, you're making me uncomfortable by what you did, it isn't actually true. What's really going on is we're uncomfortable in here and something out here simply triggered it, pointed out to us, mirrored for us the uncomfortability that goes on in the world, right? And so what we're doing, so I've noticed that because I have, instead of making my world smaller, my rebellious nature kept wanting to grow it. My adventurous nature kept bringing me forth and going, we're going to explore. We're going to be adventurous. We're going to try this out. I have these buddies from high school that when I tell them now how much anxiety and fear I went through as a kid, they don't even believe me because of what I did. They go, you're lying to us. There's no way you could have done that in the face of that kind of fear and anxiety that you're expressing that you had. But in fact, that was the truth of it. And so I was lucky because I had all that fear and anxiety, all that uncomfortability, and the wherewithal, the resilience to move forward and take action anyway, to go out into the world anyway, to try things out anyway. Now, there are those who have made their world small enough where they have stopped speaking out about who they are. They have lost their voice. We're all born with a voice, but some folks give it up, lose it. And so for them, facing the uncomfortable is speaking up. But what I notice happens with that sometimes is that in their speaking up, they are expecting the other person to give up what they're doing. They're expecting the other person to change because of their uncomfortability. They're asking to be truly themselves without offering the same to somebody else. I see that a lot. Because what happens is if you are going to stand up for yourself, others are going to react to that. They're going to have their reaction. And in this, it's like what Ash was talking about last week, the allowing. Can we allow, since we want to have our voice heard, can we allow for the other person we're sharing our voice to have their reaction in their power, whoever they're being? That's uncomfortable. That is uncomfortable. But there's no way to grow unless you're uncomfortable. That's the only place of growth. The more we work at trying to be comfortable, the less we are growing. This is really important because lots of times I notice for myself and others, we're just working on being comfortable. And maybe you've had a life that's been as uncomfortable as mine. And so you get tired of being uncomfortable. What you want is to have a little bit of comfort, to have some comfort, right? Just to have a break from all the uncomfortability. And I would never begrudge you that. When last year, I realized that I was uncomfortable sitting too long, which is what made me was one of the impetuses to become a minister, to become your spiritual leader, so I didn't have to sit there listening to somebody. Every place I went, I volunteered. I did anything I could not to have to sit there, right? And so last year I said, you know what? I'm running from the uncomfortability of sitting. And so I started to meditate in a way I really hadn't before. And I meditated, and it was hard for me because turns out I really did have an issue with sitting. And so I sat and I started meditating. I got to 5 minutes, I got to 10, I got to 15, I got it all the way up to an hour where I could sit and it was comfortable. And once I got there, I felt like I'd done it. I backed it off to 20 minutes because that felt like the perfect spot for me. And I've been at 20 minutes meditating now for the past year. Pretty much every day, I sit and meditate for about 20 minutes. A couple of weeks ago, it occurred to me that I'd gotten really comfortable with 20 minutes. And that I was losing the edge that was possible. So I recently raised it to 30. Because if I get too comfortable, I'm not growing. And so what I've learned is I want to look for those edges. I look for them. I offer you the exercise of looking for your edge. Noticing it, knowing what it is, so that you can grow there. That's why I listen to the news. Any place in which I'm uncomfortable, there's something there where I get to gain more power. I noticed that I have, and Ash has pointed this out to me, I've got a huge container of my ability to allow people to be people. I have no issue with how people are and have really stopped being amazed by most of it. And it's because that's life. But I got here through constantly pushing the edge of my uncomfortability. I'm still doing it, right? I was talking this morning to Ash around kids who are raped, bombs being dropped on Palestine and in Ukraine. All these horrendous things. How do I be with that in this teaching? How do we come to terms in a way with what goes on in the world or what's happening in our own personal lives in a way that we can find our center? Be in that place of growth, compassion, love, care. Because I want to be there with all of it. That's why I read the news. I realize that if I don't, I'm giving my power away. They have a saying in Zen that I've been meditating on this week as well, which is that each of us are in our own dream alone. Each of us are in our own dream alone. And yet, we feel it, it's not just a yearn for connection. When we get it, we feel it. And it feels real. And it's there for us. And there's comfort in it. And it's good. And it's what we all want. It's what I want. But when I look at it from but is the wrong word, and, because I want those things, right? And so it's really more and with that, I want to understand that we're all having this dream in our own way. You know, almost every movie these days is based on the heroic adventure, right? It's very particular. It's about somebody who is living their normal life, who then goes through something, an event that changes. They're now out of their normal lives, where they have to somehow step up, and then there's something that goes on where they reject stepping up, but then something else happens that forces them to step up, or they think forces them to step up, because we all have a choice. And then goes on to under incredible circumstances, right? Our favorite movies are the ones where the circumstances are just so horrendous and they rise. Why is it we're so attracted to those movies? Because we know that possibility within ourselves. We all have that possibility of being that hero in our own lives in a way that can impact the world, because we love the heroes that impact the world. And we go, I don't have that possibility. I can't be that. You just gave away your power. There is not a single one of us who is not born with all the power of the universe. With anything that is there is nothing, everything is within the grasp of your dream. What is your dream? I hear people, you ask some people what they want, and their answer is, I don't know. And I want you to know that's never the truth. It's never true that you don't know what you want. What is true is you believe what you truly want isn't possible, and it's really hard to decide what you want second. If you hear yourself say, I don't know, to the question, what do you want? Check what you know deep in your soul you actually did want, but obviously don't believe is possible. And see if you can open to the possibility. See if you can open to the possibility that what it is you thought wasn't possible might be. So that you can say, yes, I do know what I want. I just don't believe it's possible. Let me work on that part. Not lie to myself and say I don't know what I want. Because the more honest we can be with ourselves, the more authentic we show up, the more possible anything is to rise. I was speaking to a gentleman the other week who was telling me about he was having physical ailments. And after sharing some of that with me, he said, well, I think I'm just supposed to say I'm great. And I'm like, no. Let's be clear that it's uncomfortable walking in a place where everybody's in this high spirit and you're not. So that may be your growing edge, but not to give yourself up and then lie about you're great too. It's uncomfortable, but it's a growing edge that we can all have, because how can you get support if you're lying about where you're at? If you're saying you're great when you're not, then the possibility of support is nil. If you don't even come up to, yeah, I could use some. I'm having a hard time right now. I woke up this morning, I was having a hard time. I don't know if you guys know this. I am not a morning person. Getting up and showing up Sunday mornings is, I love being here with you guys. I just wish this was at 6 p.m. That's what would work for me. But it's my growing edge. So I show up, right? Because and when you think about it that way, it's like, it's great and it's inspiring and it helps me rise. When I think of it, okay, I'm showing up so that because this is my growing edge and I get to be inspired by myself in that so that I can then come and do my best to inspire you guys. Right? That's how it works. You can do this in your life when you face your growing edge, whatever it is. And remember, when I say facing your growing edge, I am speaking about it from the yogic way of looking at things, which is move into your stretch and smile. If you can't smile, back off the stretch to where you can. It doesn't have to be this big everything or nothing. There's all these degrees in between where you get to stretch a little bit so that you can still smile into it. Wherever that growing edge is, what is it for you? Where is your place in your life where you can see this is your point of growth? This is where I can stretch into next. I'm asking myself that question every single morning in my meditation. Where am I stretching today? And then make sure I do it, right? But with that, your practice becomes part of your life. Uncomfortable becomes part of your life, and maybe it already is, but maybe you haven't viewed it as the place of growth, the place you can be more, the place you can become the greater you that you are. Because that's what's possible, is when you move into those places that are uncomfortable at the rate that works for you. You will grow, I promise, if you can breathe into it a little, right? Just take it at a pace that works for you. All our paces are different, and none of us have got the same place, that particular corner of growth. So maybe it's similar. We may have some similar spots, but they're not the same. Each of us are unique that way. But I can tell you this, the more you can grow and breathe into those places of uncomfortable, the more you regain your power, the more powerful you become, the more your life starts showing up in ways you didn't even know that it would. If I had given into the fact that I was not a morning person and didn't do this, I would have missed out so greatly on what has happened since I showed up here. I mean, my life has been extraordinary since I showed up here. And it wouldn't have if I'd been the guy that says, nah, that's too early for me. You know? Because anytime we give in to our uncomfortability, we are missing an opportunity for power, for extraordinary, for miraculous, for awe. And you don't even have to stretch in a lot, just a little, just a little. Classes help, just saying. Stand in your true power. Make a stand for who you are. In doing so, make sure you're standing in for the other person as well. If you find yourself telling or asking somebody to change, notice that for yourself and go, wait a minute, they get to be who they are. I get to speak up and they get to have their reaction. Both are true. And that's how we grow as a community. That's how the world shows itself in growth, is when we are able to stand in a way that allows the others to do that too, which could be a way different reaction from what we were hoping for. But it is where the more authentic, the more alive, the more beauty, the more awe that's possible. And I know that for each and every one of you here. Thank you. I love you.